We hear a lot of perspectives on the Mankind podcast. Inclusion of a guest is not an endorsement of their views, and the opinions expressed here do not always represent the mission or values of the Mankind Project USA.
Looks like the rain has gone.
Hi, welcome to the Mankind Podcast. In this episode of the podcast, I'm talking with Brandon Peele, author of a brand new book, Purpose Work Nation, Leading Organizations in Service of Our Nation's Sacred Purpose, which launches on February 22nd, 2022. So some of the questions that we're posing here: is it possible that the unraveling of narratives we're seeing all around us might be an opportunity to actually manifest some of the visions that the United States is founded on? Is there an opportunity in what seems like chaos for greater equality, for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and for unity, e pluribus unum? And how might organizations and companies be best positioned to make this happen? And finally, what does a bald eagle have to do with all this? Brandon's work on building purpose has taken him all over the United States, speaking and working with audiences at some of the biggest companies in the world. Purpose Work Nation brings forth the research about where we've been, some ideas about where we are now, and some vision of where we might choose to go together. And your support for Brandon's work will also have a positive impact for the Mankind Project. Brandon is generously donating a portion of the book's proceeds, especially during this launch time, to the Mankind Project USA. Thank you, Brandon. This conversation is for you if you're feeling the tectonic shifts in the culture and you're looking for ways to help forge new directions for yourself and for the organizations you work with. It's also for you if you're a wild-eyed leader interested in quadruple bottom line thinking: people, planet, profit, and purpose. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you on the other side. Hey everybody, welcome back. This is Bison Hodgson with the Mankind Podcast, where we're setting out to prove that there is more than one way to be a man. I am stoked to be sitting with an old friend today, Brandon Peele. Brandon and I have been jiving together for a while. Since 2014 was when Brandon got involved in the Man on Purpose course created by MKP USA. And it's very interesting because we're going to be talking about purpose here today. Say hello, Brandon.
Hey, everyone. Great to be here.
Glad to have you here. So Brandon Peele is a best-selling author, the CEO of Unity Lab, and an expert in purpose leadership and culture change. He's trusted as a keynote speaker, a consultant, and a program leader by organizations such as Google, Johnson & Johnson, Stanford University, JDRF, Morgan Stanley, U.S. Marine Corps, University of California, Berkeley, LinkedIn, U.S. Navy, Slalom Consulting, the U.S. Coast Guard, on and on and on. He is the author of The Planet on Purpose in 2018 and co-author of Purpose Rising in 2017 and The Purpose Blueprint in 2015. Look at that. His work's been featured by news organizations such as USA Today, U.S. News and World Report, and Forbes. He holds an MBA in leadership from Columbia Business School, is an imperative certified purpose leader, and serves on the Council of the Global Purpose Leaders and the Leadership Council of the Mankind Project in San Diego. That is pretty cool. Brandon was just, I think, getting started in the purpose space back in 2014 when he and I and Chris Kyle ended up in a bunch of rooms together working on the Man on Purpose course. Let's talk about your purpose journey as a starting point. How did you get into this?
Yeah, well, purpose wasn't something I grew up with. It was, pretty boring, kind of go be successful, get married, move to the suburbs. And for me, there was like this longing, this hole, like there's got to be something more. I watch Indiana Jones. I'm like, where's the adventure? Where's the arc? Where's the Shiva Lingam stone? Where's the fun? Because, Midwest, 1980s, 1990s, it's pretty like milquetoast, boring, at least in the suburbs, the white suburbs that I grew up in. And I didn't really know how to deal with that or even name it. So I kind of put it aside until my late 20s when I started to do some inner work. And that's when I did the NWTA and a bunch of other work. And in my early 30s, I met somebody who called themselves a purpose guide. And that totally captivated me. What does that even mean? How can somebody help you do this? And I was so, like I said, this like wild-eyed Indiana Jones, like I must find the purpose kind of thing, and ended up working with him for 6 months. And not that the NWTA and MKP isn't an important part of my life and keeps me on purpose, but this was that missing activation piece of like, oh, here's who I am and here's what I'm meant to do. And for me, I just felt like I grew roots and felt much less concerned about the inner voices, specifically the critic, the skeptic, the wounded child, risk manager, image consultants, all these things that have kept me small. And so I guess the way I hold it now, it's like, it's a human right. So many of the ways that we've been socialized and conditioned, our identities, from our families, from society, they're not working out too well for us. I mean, right before we hit record, we're like, oh, maybe this is the end of civilization, the last podcast that ever gets done. and whether it's our attitudes on race or what a man is or what a woman is, like all that stuff isn't our purpose or our soul's calling. And so for me, it was like this giant unveiling, unearthing of what's really down there, which is a kid who wants to have fun, who wants to serve, who wants to be blessed and to bless others. And so, it was this revelation. And of course, I keep sitting in circle to stay true to that, because those voices are still there. Those external forces trying to keep me small are still there, and I have to deal with them.
I find it really fascinating that you actually connected purpose, sense of like grand. There's something huge, right, about purpose work. Why am I here? To the call for adventure and the little kid in each of us. Go a little further into that.
Yeah. So I remember as a boy being very wild-eyed, just like big eyes, like excited for discovery, to connect. And then I got smaller over time. I got kind of put into this tinier expression of what it meant to be a man in the Midwest. And I didn't know it because it happened imperceptibly, with a slight here, slight there, decision made for me. And then all of a sudden, here I am on the same treadmill of professional success and suburban malaise. And so purpose work, in a sense, gets back to that. It's in a sense like a deep remembering of really who we are at the level of being, but also that it's all made up, like meaning life, the way we're constituted socially, economically, politically, all that stuff was made up by people with no connection to their purpose. Just they're doing stuff because
bold
they
claim
think that's
number one.
Say again.
There's bold claim number one. All that stuff was made up by people who weren't connected to their purpose. Okay, we'll come back.
Yeah, exactly. And so if the adventure, the journey is first to the self, to reclaim that initial essence. For me, it shows up as wildness, as play, as courage, as compassion, as wonder. And then it can't be this thing that I keep for myself, right? Like, I hold it as a human right. Everybody needs to be deinstitutionalized, rehealed, rehumanized, and kind of reborn into their authentic selves. And I first started doing that as a guide, working with folks one-on-one and big programs, such as Man on Purpose program. And now I'm like, well, we can keep doing that. We're going to keep getting the same results. You know, a few dozen, few hundred folks in a program, you know, train some more guides. It's just like iterative approach to a problem that is systemic. Because we have a political economy that does not pull for soul, does not pull for our greatness. It conditions us to do something else. And so that's where my eyes are trained now. It's like, how do we change this made up game to be one that pulls for purpose and stands for it and demands it, versus the one we have right now that by all measures is not working.
So there's an individual, there's a collective, and there's a systemic. And in the statement that you just had, like all three of those things were wrapped in. Let's stick with the individual, because I know some of our listeners, the purpose conversation is kind of brand new, and you ran through a bunch of things. So I'm wild-eyed boy, and then stuff starts getting piled onto me as an individual, and you named a bunch of those things.
Yeah.
So let's do that, and then pull away the veil. What do we see when we start pulling away those things?
Yeah. So there's a piece of the journey that, or I should say, a piece of the pylon that is natural and normal, like our psychological individuation. We need to have some sense of an inner critic that is moving us forward into growth, into becoming our full selves. We have some sense of a skeptic that questions, you know, what's made up, what's real, what's in service. Some sense of an image consultant, because we are fundamentally a relational species, individuals. You know, some sense of a risk manager that doesn't jump off buildings. Like, all these things are normal psychological individuation things in the present across societies. Right? Now, when you're in a society like ours, those get developed in a particularly messed up way. Like, you know, we've talked about it on this podcast and other places, but it's like, men have to be successful. Like, so we have to keep making money, keep looking cooler, fitter, you know, more stoic, less encumbered by things out in the world. It's all about the individual. And so for me, coming of age in the 80s, 90s, it was all about me and my success, my sexual conquest, my this, all that. And I had lost that part of me that is fundamentally connected, which I would say probably the larger part of me. I was fundamentally connected to my family, to my soil, to my community, to this nation, to the planet. And so it was almost like an atomization of the male experience. And by the time I got out of all these different educational institutions, it was like, all right, this tiny little speck of maximizing self-interest, go forth and maximize. And we even romanticized it. I mean, I read books about investment bankers. It's like this whole thing. And I had taken all that on and in.
Yeah.
And so the uncoupling of that identity, those messages, that worldview was very painful. And purpose work helped. NWTA helped. Men's circles helped. Meditation, going to India, hallucinogens, all that stuff helped to kind of break the kind of toxic masculine frat boy code individualism stuff, where I've started to get back to that part of me that wants to connect, that has a sense of adventure, that wants to serve, that feels much more authentic as a man. It's more fun. It's more rich.
Beautiful. So all that, and I love that you framed all of the inner voices and inner dialogue in a development model, right? This is stuff that we take on because we have to, because it keeps us safe, right? On some level. And then you pull all of that back and you start to get back to some of that fundamental stuff. And then I'm just going to throw you into the journey here. We are both Gen Xers, birthed by boomers, who that was it. It's you, man, the individual success. It's Michael Douglas up on stage saying, greed is good. It's Leo DiCaprio, celebrating in what was the other movie, right?
Wolf of Wall Street.
Wolf of Wall Street. Yeah, it's that. That's what we were like. That was our destiny. That's what we're destined to do. And now you unpack all of these individual socialization cues and you start looking around. And then you wrote Planet on Purpose to deal with some of that. A lot of that was the kind of individual and collective, and can we glimpse a collective purpose for ourselves?
Yeah.
That fit? Is that about right?
Yeah, it does. I needed something to make sense of my own experience of this kind of deinstitutionalization, soul awakening, and also that to begin to ask the questions for how we create a society and political economy that pulls for it. And that begins at the individual level. We've got to do the work ourselves. And then it calls for like a new imagining of, well, what actually is the purpose of humanity? What is the purpose of the cosmos? How do we constitute ourselves here in our worlds as family members, as economic actors, to fulfill on the actual purpose of the world, which is not resource extraction and centralization, but something across wisdom traditions way more magical, way more fun. So Planet on Purpose is kind of that Grail diary for me. You remember from the third Indiana Jones? Like I need a map. I need a map that says at least I wrote it down here once, or like I could go back to this map. Like, okay, this is the direction we're moving.
And what are point to a few of those North Stars that you discovered in that? What do you think the purpose of humanity is? Why are we here?
Oh boy. I haven't read my own book in many years. So.
Well, you're going to have to wing it. I
know. So again, this is after one becomes personally constituted, starts to see themselves as a purpose-driven leader, then the bigger questions open up. Okay, to what end? Like, is it just to give my gifts? Is it just to express my virtues? Just to empower others? But like, where is this bus headed? And so I started asking, like, all right, what is the purpose of the cosmos? And looking across wisdom traditions, but as well as deep history, quantum science, at least in the material expression, the cosmos seems to be doing a few things over time. Like it seems to be getting more sophisticated, like higher levels of complexity in energetic form. So human beings are one of them. Mm-hmm. So we're like more and more things are kind of coming together to create things that are more and more unique. And then also through Eastern philosophy, religion, and the truths that quantum entanglement is pointing to, we're more and more connected. So less and less atomized, more and more connected, which will, of course, occur to anybody not indoctrinated the way you and I do is like, duh. Like, yeah, we're all one, duh. And so there's that sense. And then the other beautiful piece is like the undoing of concrete knowledge. The cosmos is expanding. It's omnicentric. We don't know where the center is. It keeps expanding in all these different inexplicable ways. So every truth is in relationship to something else that keeps moving. We've got Heisenberg uncertainty. We've got all this stuff that keeps like pulling back. Like, yeah, you actually don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, you actually don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, you actually don't know what you're talking about. So, but that's a trend. Like every new study reveals 10 new questions. So at least from our small human perspective, it could be said that it's a fool's game. Like the the unknown keeps staying out there. The known unknowns keep increasing. So what do we have? What do we have given that we're becoming more specialized and yet interconnected, less certain? We've got these other modalities, which are more spiritual or soul-based or purpose-oriented, that guide us as, which is now clearly evident, reality is just full-on faceplant yard sale. There's nothing out there that's like, oh, well, at least I can hang my hat on, I'll be able to vote in November. Like, maybe. So I had to do that for myself. I'm not sure if anyone else was really like, oh, I really need somebody to make sense of the cosmos for me. But I had to do it for myself because I needed to know how I'm supposed to constitute here and try to influence and shepherd and steward the human expression, which lives within the cosmos. So like a body, there are organs and cells, and our planet is part of a larger thing. And who are we as part of that?
Part of a part. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a way to kind of triangulate humanity's purpose in terms of awakening and inner guidance versus, more muss and Bransons floating out to try to do that stuff, which I'm all for. But let's take care of this first.
Yeah. And let's take care of this.
Yeah. First.
Yeah. 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 Beautiful. The unwinding, and this is a somewhat tangent, which I'm going to go take us down just for a minute, because part of your education, part of my education over the course of the last decade more plus is this unwinding stuff. So you and I are both, you're rereading and I'm reading The Dawn of Everything.
If you're enjoying the Mankind podcast, how about taking another step? This one takes some courage. And you've got it. Check out the Men's Work Introduction. It's 3 sessions over 3 weeks. New sessions start every month. And we even have a cohort tailored to LGBTQ men, which you can learn more about at bit.ly/menswork2.
And just that questioning, right? It's like, oh, that narrative. And that's what we keep pulling apart. If you pull at a thread of the narrative of what we've been taught, The Dawn of Everything is about archaeological history and the kind of history of humanity, right? Going along with Sapiens and other books like that. Those old stories we've been telling ourselves that our boomer parents and the blah, 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 back for about 400 years have been teaching us. They just keep unraveling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I was really hoping that this book would come up because, I mean, there are holes in the reasoning, the logic, the research, all there always are going to be holes like that. There were after Conscious Steel, Sapiens, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But what this one does to a far greater degree than any other book is it tills the soil of possibility that human beings have been inventing and constituting themselves in so many more diverse ways than our kind of Western capitalist Panglossian version. Like, if this is the only way, well, actually, no, not at all. There are other ways where people have more freedom, more prosperity, more spiritual connection, more fulfillment, more fun that, can be invented. So even though we've centralized and kind of landed on a monomyth around industrialized capitalism, no, it's not the only thing. You can totally do it.
Endless growth economy and this form of government over all of those kinds of shifts. Yeah, beautiful. I just had to touch on that because there's some connection there to where what we're talking about now which is you're launching a book in another month called Purpose Work Nation. And the subtitle is Leading Organizations in Service of Our Nation's Sacred Purpose. So here we start to get into, again, radical ideas here. So what's the premise of Purpose Work Nation?
So we have a purpose as a nation. They are in our founding documents. They have been elucidated and attempted, and it's not often named. So we don't, like in common vernacular, we're not often talking about life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, e pluribus unum, to form a more perfect nation, all people created equal. Like, we explicitly say we are a covenantal nation. We say this is who we are. Whereas other nations don't necessarily have that. They've got, of course, histories and cultures and all that. But we attempted in the midst of several centuries, if not millennia, of oppression from empire, assimilation, and genocide, and all that kind of stuff. We attempted to say, we're going to be something y'all have never seen before. Like, we're gonna get this done. We're gonna get e pluribus unum done. So our problems that we have in this nation are way worse than other nations. But because of that purpose, we have something to hold ourselves to account. And like I said, I don't need to read news headlines, but trust has gone down. Economic inequality has skyrocketed. Racial animosity, political polarization, climate change ineptitude, all that kind of stuff. There's no unifying purpose right now for the nation. We don't have a Hitler to defeat. We don't have anything on our doors right now. All we have is just watching the daily dissolution of what we grew up with. And so, looking across sector. So, anyways, like, back it up. George Floyd's murdered. I'm like, oh my God. Like, I'm not going to watch that again. And I'm ashamed that it took me that long to, like, really claim this fight as my fight. I'm like, why is this affecting me so much? And it's because I can't feel at home here when this stuff happens. It's like there's a fire in my house, and I'm not going to just sit in the living room and watch television. I have to put out the freaking fire. Like, it affects me not just, like, personally. Like, I don't want to, I don't want to see bad things, but, like, it's like a moral injury that we live in this country that oppresses folks. So out of that pain, that heartbreak, I'm like, well, we've got a purpose as a nation, really off the mark, out of integrity. How do we bring it back? So I started to look at all these different sectors of society, levers to pull, and almost everything is completely hosed. It's like democracy, legislative ability, and there's a stack of awesome legislation that's dying in the Senate. Our religion's on a decline. Education is like a joke and becoming more segregated because our communities are becoming more segregated around race and politics. And the only place left where e pluribus unum is possible is the organization. It's the only place where we have 5 generations, virtually every ethnicity, sexual orientation, and identity. And organizations have a lot to gain because people increasingly want to work in these places, want to buy from places that are inclusive, and they're already spending a bunch of money trying to make it that way through DEI, learning and development, and wellness. So I was like, okay, well, this feels like the right theory of change for our species and for our nation. How can we sandbox with each organization as a fertile environment for the activation of our highest ideals, e pluribus unum, life, liberty, happiness. So that's the hypothesis of the book. It's like only business can save us, because where else is it going to come from?
So that is a very radical assertion, right? Because you and I are both friends with lots of folks who, kind of first thing is burn it down,
Yeah.
Burn down the system. And you're coming from this place of, here's something that I see that actually is putting some money and effort and time into creating some of these core principles. Everybody's equal, out of many one, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. and that fits and starts and not perfect. And all of those things are true. I'm curious about the great resignation and how you see that playing with this book.
I don't really address it there primarily because it's still so new. Like I have my own intuitions, but as an author, I just can't, I think it should be, it's because of this, like we have to have some data. And so what's coming out now is that, it goes back to John Edwards' Two Americas. It's the same thing here, where the Great Resignation is primarily driven by low-income folks who are like, I am out. Like, I'm not going to do this for $12 an hour. I'm going to go get 25 doing something else. And while professional classes are still impacted by all the main issues around exploitation and all that, for them it's more like a purpose awakening. They're like, given all the problems, who am I in the face of that? So I'm hoping that this book reaches them. I hope it reaches folks in the working class too. But my hope is that there actually is something to do right now. Like, we can liberate human potential right now inside of organizations. Connect people to their purpose, have bring it to work, welcome the whole self, create inclusive cultures and inclusive hiring and development ethoses. And who knows if we'll be successful? I don't know. I mean, I did my best to try to put together a theory of change that's plausible. But what I know is not going to be successful is doing nothing and hoping that some new politician or some, because it's not happening. And even if we were to get a bunch of great people in office, I mean, what's going to stop organizations, corporate and wealthy interests, from perverting the process again? So if you go to the source, which is corporate and wealthy interests, how do we activate hearts there? If we can do that, theoretically, we would have the leaders we deserve.
I'm thinking of Dan Price. You know who I'm talking about? The CEO guy who reduced his pay to $70,000. Everybody in the organization starts at $70,000. That's a little bit about what we're talking about here.
Yeah. And there's lots of Dan Prices. Dan's just also very vocal.
Yes.
So people know about him, but there's the Maine Beer Company. I mean, $18 an hour starting wage, full benefits, parental leave. And I could name a dozen others, like Eileen Fisher Clothing, Patagonia, folks who have already taken massive steps to become purpose-driven, not just at the organization level, but activating individual purpose and creating true cultures of belonging and inclusion. So it's already happening. And my hope is that this book and just the message in general reaches this kind of wild-eyed leader. It's I can't sit this one out. I've sat out too many battles. If not now, when? If not me, who? It's got to be me.
So what am I going to get from the book as that wild-eyed leader? What can I look forward to in this book?
Well, assuming you're our age or older, pretty much everything that we've been taught about our nation's history and capitalism and Western civilization has been undone by the last 40 years of research. And that's what Dawn of Everything does as well. So you're going to get an update and this is actually what's going on. And what has been driving all of our offshoring, deunionization, systemic racism, because there's actually deeper themes underneath that. And you'll see that there actually is a much more empowering myth and story that has only begun to be named. And then how do you actually do it in your organization? So I want to speak just slightly to the myth piece. This is a very mythologically literate audience. So systemic racism in the United States it is certainly our expression of this underlying myth. But the myth of exploitation, dehumanization, goes back forever. It's on the rise. I mean, 2/3 of humans are under autocratic exploitative regimes. And so what I do is I just kind of name it. I say, well, the United States chose the bald eagle as its bird. Now, why is that? And we've got all these purpose statements, but does this bird really reflect who we are? Because what it does is it hunts, steals, scavenges, hoards, takes its bounty back to be feasted upon, and then does it again. Just like swooping down from on top to download to take. And just like the race and power dynamics in our nation, it's white on top, brown on the bottom. And I'm like, this is a shitty freaking bird to inspire us and unify us as a nation. And so, like, well, what else would more deeply express our stated purpose, King's dream and beloved community? Well, in 2016, we adopted the bison as our national mammal. And so if the eagle, the eagle has its ethics of solitary individual hunter, hoarder, what might the best
scavenger
be of the bison?
Yeah.
And so it's an attempt to create a new myth for who we are as a nation, but also as organizational leaders. This bison-led myth of care, of generativity, of interconnection, of play. Bison have more fun than anybody. I mean, they lounge around and play and wander off. They exist with other species. There's no genocidal bison. And so I just kind of, philosophize and ponder, like, well, if we were to construct ourselves as a bison-led nation, here's what it might look like.
That's totally fascinating. And I didn't know that. So I've seen the bison as the symbol of unity of your company, but I didn't know either of those facts.
Oh, I didn't share that. Whoops.
Oh, that's so cool. I love that. And then there's this that invites an unpacking of American mythology around indigenous people.
Mm-hmm.
Also, right?
Absolutely.
And the symbolism of the bison within indigenous culture. Wow, that's really cool. So on your website, and I'm watching our time here, which is unitylab.co is Brandon's website, unitylab.co. He has a layout for this book, for Purpose Work Nation, leading organizations in service of a nation's sacred purpose. You will see there's a chapter layout that goes into a little bit more of what we've been talking about. There's some of the kind of framing of the problem as Brandon has been exploring it. And the book goes through. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Twin drivers of flourishing. Do you want to say, what are the twin drivers of flourishing?
So there are two things that I think liberate more human potential than anything else. And they are purpose activation, and scienceofpurpose.org will show you all that data. Live longer lives, happier, healthier, better leaders. We have better sex. I mean, it's crazy. Like if you're going to tweak the software at any point, just purpose is the place to start. And the other piece is what's called intergroup contact theory. And it's something developed in the 50s, a long time ago. But basically, the short of it is take people who are different, give them a shared purpose, and suddenly they start to like and love each other, trust each other. And they find that when intergroup contact is at play, when you bring diverse people together to do something, whether that's learn or achieve a task, outgroup bias is reduced 94% of the time. Now, what's interesting is that purpose also reduces anxiety in diverse environments and increases the appetite to want to live in a diverse city. So these two things are almost like a yin and the yang. Like how do we move towards organizational and national flourishing, activate people's deeper identity beyond their whiteness, blackness, etc. Put them together to learn something, and empathy, trust, mutual respect develop. And so in that chapter, we lay out all the research. Like, here's why this works. Here is how it works. It's the chapter that follows it. And so it's like these two tools that inform a pedagogy that Unity Lab uses to transform organizations to be more inclusive, loving, productive, fun, and fulfilling.
That was really well framed. So I can't wait to get this book, add it to my bookshelf, listen to this book, I hope.
Mm-hmm.
Also,
eventually we'll get there. Yeah.
Okay. So I've been sitting with Brandon Peele, and the book that we've been talking about that's launching, do you have a launch date?
It's currently end of February. It might move, but I don't think it will. Yeah.
End of February. Purpose Work Nation, leading organizations in service of our nation's sacred purpose. I apologize for the dogs barking in the background.
Okay.
Nobody's got a handle on the dogs right now. Brandon, I can't wait to read the book. We'll come back and talk about it more after you get it launched. And once we finish, we'll come back. And once we both finish The Dawn of Everything, we'll do another conversation just talking about that. So find in the show notes down below, you'll find links to all the relevant stuff for Brandon and how to get in touch with him, how to follow him. Thank you for hanging out with us on the Mankind Podcast, and we'll see you next time.
This has been the Mankind Podcast, produced in association with the Mankind Project USA. I have been your host, Brandon Clift, and I personally want to thank our guests for joining us today and imparting their wisdom from their experiences in this amazing journey called life. And of course, I want to thank you, the listener, because through your attention and your support, you make it a heck of a lot easier for us to let men out there in the world know that they are not alone and that there is more than one way to be a man. Special thanks, of course, goes to my incredible team, Marketing and Communications Director Bison Hodgson, producer and editor of this episode, Michael Russo, who makes me sound so much more intelligent than I actually am, so of course, special kudos goes there. And if you've been enjoying the music throughout this episode and all of our episodes, check out Jim, Donovan, and the Sun King Warriors. I have links to them in the show notes. Now, the fee for this episode is simple. If you found gold and insights that you believe could benefit your loved ones and those you care about, be sure to share it with them. And of course, remember that life doesn't happen to us, it happens for us, so long as we rip the pen out of fate's hand and become the author of our own story. So my friend, pick up the pen and we'll see you next week. Lots of love.